Okay.
Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Srivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Magyanathmirandasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Siddhantotpalasaranithyarasikam hamsam vilasatmakam Audaryakya Sudhama Sevakadanam Vishramba Bhakti Pradam Yachna Yukti Vichakshanam Tvagabido Vaishishta Shaktya Sada Vandeham Tripurarinamaya Kayatim Shri Bhakti Vedantinam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratvishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vrindayai Tulasi Devyai Priyayai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyatyai Namo Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavatar Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Iva Kevalam Kalau Nastyeva 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 Gatiranyatha. So welcome dear devotees, welcome Madan Mohan Prabhu, welcome Shamananda, welcome Sakirati, and welcome everybody else listening to this, wherever you are and at whatever time. Today, I'm planning to continue my lectures on the Srimad Bhagavatam. This episode is called The Answers of Suta Goswami, Part 2. I don't know yet how many parts these answers will take up, but I think at least the third part, but we will see. The context here is that we're in the first canto, right at the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the second chapter. So far, we've been introduced to the topic Satyam Param Dhimahi. The first verse ended. Let us meditate on the highest supreme truth. And that supreme truth is Sri Krishna, from whom creation emanates, in whom creation rests, and into whom creation will return at the end of the cosmic cycle. This text, the Srimad Bhagavatam, is the mature fruit of Vyasadev's understanding. And it is like a ripe mango with no rind and no stone that can be drunk like a nectar elixir. Then we were introduced to the location of the story, the rishis of Naimisharanya, doing their 1,000-year sacrifice, sitting there together with Shaunaka, who's the leader of the rishis, or the Brahmins, and they're sitting there together with Suta, the speaker of the Puranas, and they start asking him questions, having finished their morning rituals. And then at the beginning of the second chapter, Suta Goswami began answering. And his answer follows the questions. The sages, they post 6 questions. Very bold. The sages put 6 questions to Suta Goswami. And in the previous part, I went through his answer to the first question. And I'm picking up from there. So the second question was, Yenatma samprasidati tadvada. Speak about that which samprasidati, which completely satisfies the Atma. Yenatma samprasidati. This phrase, Atma samprasidati or suprasidati, this is a phrase that comes several times in the Bhagavatam. It's a favorite phrase of the sages. They like it because it does two different things. It, first of all, speaks about suprasada or samprasada, like a complete satisfaction. Much of the satisfaction we have in this world is, shall we say, less than complete. We are satisfied with food, for example. We just had an excellent meal here before this class. And it was nice. It was really nice, kind of simple but yummy pasta. And I was satisfied with it. But I was also thinking, it would have been so nice with some rasagullas. So I wasn't completely satisfied in the moment. My mind was imagining things that I didn't get. And the other thing, of course, is that even had I gotten those rasagullas, and even had I, by some inconceivable miracle, been able to not overeat on them, nevertheless, that satisfaction would have waned after some time. I would have become hungry again. So satisfaction, happiness in this world is never su or sam. It's never complete. It's incomplete either in not being perfect in the moment that we get it, or then incomplete in disappearing after some time. So the kind of satisfaction that the Bhagavatam speaks about is different from this. It's samprasidati, it's complete, full satisfaction. So that's the first thing this phrase does. It points out the difference between material and spiritual satisfaction. And the other thing, of course, is that it says Atma samprasidati. This is something that will satisfy the self. Atma in Sanskrit can mean self, very kind of similarly to in the English language. I did this myself, you could say in English. And in Sanskrit, you could say the same. Atmana kritam, it means somebody did that themselves, or himself or herself. So Atma can mean self in a very kind of general way. But Atma in its more kind of Vedantic, and that's where the Bhagavatam really, the kind of language that the Bhagavatam speaks to us. The Bhagavatam, when it uses the word Atma, it usually uses it in the sense of the true self. The self that is beyond our mind and bodies. A kind of self that we probably all have almost no understanding of at the moment. This is kind of a shocking realization that no matter how introspective and kind of calm and kind of wise we are, we may not be teenagers anymore, so we have some kind of understanding of ourselves. But it still only pertains to this particular mental and physical being. The kind of understanding we have of the true self is almost completely lacking. But that is the self that the Bhagavatam aims at pleasing. So when the sages ask Suta, Yena Atma Samprasidati Tadvada, they want to know about what kind of thing can please this real self. Now, the first question already was about bhakti. And the sages, they've already heard something about bhakti in the previous Puranas that they've been listening to. So they're not completely exploring unknown ground here. They have some inkling of the truth. And the answer here to the second question, which continues on directly after the answer to the first question, these two questions, they kind of go into each other, as we will see when we read the verses. But let me get into the verses. According to the Acharyas, Suta starts answering the second question from the 14th verse of the second chapter. He says, Tasmadekena manasa bhagavan satvatam pati shrotavyak kirtitavyascha dhyeya pujash cha nityada. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. Tasmat. This is the kind of code word that introduces the new topic. Therefore. So now we're entering to the next question. Ekena manasa, with a one-pointed mind, or one-pointed attention. One should listen to, hear, and meditate and worship always Bhagavan Sattvatam Pati. Prabhupada translates Bhagavan Sattvatam Pati as the personality of Godhead who is the protector of the devotees. Here he's following the understanding of Srila Sanatana Goswami. He translates Sattvatam Pati, or he glosses. He explains the word Sattvatam Pati like that in the Vaishnava Toshani to the first, to maybe the 10th verse of the first chapter of the 10th canto. Sattvatam Pati can also be understood as the Lord of the Yadus. The Sattvatas are another word for the Yadu dynasty. And that also makes sense in this context because the word Bhagavan, of course, is a word that can apply to many personalities. Many personalities of Godhead are called Bhagavan. Even Jivas are sometimes called Bhagavan. Prabhupada often gives the example of Narada as somebody called Bhagavan. And outside of Vaishnavism, the word Bhagavan can even be attributed to completely ordinary persons. We Vaishnavas, we don't like that so much, but we do call people like Narada Bhagavan. So which Bhagavan is it that we are supposed to hear, glorify, meditate, and worship? It's the Bhagavan that is Sattvatam Pati, that is the Lord of the Yadavas and the protector of the devotees. I've just been a little bit sick for a few days, and a friend of mine lent me a very fun book that I've been reading in bed. Radha Damodar Vilasa by Vyasaki Prabhu. It tells about Vishnujan Maharaj and about Jayananda Prabhu, these kind of early saints of ISKCON. And right now, the narrative is in 1973, and many things are happening in ISKCON in the United States, which is the focus of the book. It's quite an interesting book because it shows in a fairly uncensored way the things that are happening in the movement, how new things are coming in. A more kind of heavy style is coming in of preaching, a more kind of a misogynistic understanding of society and so on. But it also shows very clearly how the Lord really is the Sattva Tampati in the sense of the protector of the devotees. There was a very dramatic description of an attack on New Vrindavan by a gang of bikers that shot some devotees. One actually even died from his wounds later on, or the lead poisoning that happened to him. But it could have gone much worse if Krishna and especially Radha hadn't protected the devotees in a rather miraculous way. So this is something that's really a speciality of Krishna. He's really the protector of the devotees. So Suta Goswami, he goes on. He says, Yad anudyasina yukta karma granthi nibandhanam chindanti kovidastasya kona kuryat kataratim. With sword in hand, intelligent people cut through the binding knots of reactionary work by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message? So the question is, what will completely satisfy the self? And the point, of course, here is, it is remembering, glorifying, meditating on, and worshipping Krishna. And he's saying, remembering Krishna, that can already cut the karma granthi nibandhana, the binding force of the knot of karma. Karma really is like a knot, or I like to sometimes refer to karma as a web. When I was a kid, I used to go fishing with my father, and it's many years since that. But I vividly remember the fish in the net, how they would get themselves completely tangled up. Like when a fish swims into the net, it's not really a big problem. Maybe it will just get stuck a little bit with the head. But if it would just calmly kind of relax, it could just kind of, by just letting go, it would kind of float backwards and be free. But that's unfortunately not what most fish do. Instead, they panic and they start trying to go forward, go to the side, and so on, and they end up more and more tangled into the web, into the net. And that's what we are doing as well. We do something bad, and then we think, oh no, I need to compensate for this. I need to do something good. And then we do something good. And instead of nullifying what we just did, we create another type of karma. So the more we do, the more kind of stuck we are within the web of karma. And the worst, of course, is that karma doesn't only apply to ourselves. Like, for example, if I would start now really abusing Shamananda here on this Zoom call, I would get bad karma for that. It would also be a Vaishnava aparat, but let's keep that to the side for the moment. But I would get bad karma for abusing somebody as nice as Shamananda. But he would also feel bad about that. And feeling bad about that, he might maybe do something silly or stupid himself because of having been abused by me. Sakyarati she would get upset because I abused her husband. So she would also do something. And you would also as well, Atmachanan. So karma is not just about what I'm doing and what result I'm getting, but whatever I'm doing, I'm also involving other people. So it's a huge mess. It's a huge mess that we've been getting kind of deeper and deeper into every lifetime. That's why it's connected. Prabhupada calls it, I think he called it in his translation, he called it the binding knot, but Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha, in his translation, he calls it the Gordian knot of the bonds resulting from selfish deeds. The Gordian knot, that's something from ancient history. There's a story that in the time of Alexander the Great, there was a knot in a place called Gordia, I suppose. And some huge knot made with like these really heavy ropes. And the story was that if somebody can untie that, then they will be able to conquer Asia. And many people had tried. So Alexander the Great, when he came there, he just took his sword and he cut it through. And people were like, well, I could have done that, but nobody else had done it. And he did actually conquer Asia, as Asia was understood in those days. So this kind of thing, cutting through this Gordian knot of karma, we will need to do like Alexander. We will need to cut it with the sword. And the sword that we need to use is Katharati. We need to do so by these stories of Krishna, by remembering him. In the previous verse, we heard about Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Dhyana, and Puja. So Dhyana is meditation, but it can also mean remembering or remembrance, to keep Krishna in our mind. This is something that is important to practice for us as sadhakas, to try to do things that will make us think of Krishna. Whether it is to worship, read, hear, kirtan, and so on. When Prabhupada speaks about Krishna consciousness, this really is what he's in the most kind of basic way referring to. Creating a kind of consciousness which is filled with Krishna. In the beginning of the devotional path, I'm sure this is something that we all were kind of amazed by, how suddenly we were thinking about Krishna and the Vaishnavas all the time. But then we kind of get a little bit kind of complacent, and we also get a little bit maybe lazy. So we start to think about Game of Thrones or our dog or what we'll have for dinner and things like that. And that's not, we don't need to beat ourselves up about that, but it's a sign of us not being super advanced spiritually. So what we should do is we should try to do things that will make us think more about Krishna, that will make us remember Krishna. That will be this kind of sword that we need for cutting this knot of karma. I heard from Shamananda Prabhu that Guru Maharaj in the last Swami call, he said that during this month of Kartik, we should study Vishwanath Chakravarti's Prema Samputa, a little book on the love of Radha and Krishna. So I heard that on Monday, and I started almost immediately, and I realized this is a short little book that will not take a very long time to read. I read it through already once, and I've come halfway through the second round, but I also realized this is some really deep stuff. So I'm going to need many rounds of reading to really get to the bottom of this. But immediately I noticed, already now I'm thinking about this little book. I'm thinking about the things said in that book. I'm thinking about the kind of dramatic setup of it. There's Krishna dressing up as a gopi and so on. So for me, at least, this is something that works. Reading about Krishna actually makes me think about Krishna. For others, maybe doing seva of deities, It may be doing seva of devotees, and so on. But whatever it is, this is what will cut the knot of karma. That's Suta Goswami's point. So he says, since his message is so powerful, who will not pay attention to it? Then he goes on. Sushrusho shraddhadanasya vasudeva katharuchi syan mahatsevaya vipraha punyatirtha nishevana. O twice-born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. So this Vasudeva Katha Ruchi, or taste for the stories or narrations of Vasudeva, that's something that we don't necessarily have. I, for one, I don't always have that taste. I was just speaking about this book that I found inspiring, but I don't always have that taste. Sometimes these books are boring and dry, and I prefer to watch Netflix. Don't tell Guru Maharaj, but that's the sad truth. But what can help me in such a situation is Mahat Seva, or service to the great. Mahat Sevaya, true service to the great. The reason for why I'm now feeling even just this little bit of taste for this book by Vishwanath Chakravarti is that I feel that Guru Maharaj wanted us to read this book. So it's a seva to him to study it. And that's inspiring to me. That also creates this kind of taste. So if we are wondering, why am I not having taste for Krishna Katha? Here is a medicine for that. Mahat Sevaya, true service to the great. I mean, it can be other things as well. We hear, for example, that offenses is something that take away our taste for not only hearing about Krishna, but all kind of bhakti. So if we feel that we're completely bereft of taste, and everything just feels like really boring and gray and dull, it's also possible that we have committed some offense. But Guru Maharaj, many times when he speaks about offenses, he makes the point that offenses are not something that we need to become neurotic about. We do sometimes hear about people doing offenses and not really being aware of it, but that's very rare. Usually an offense is something that you do knowingly. Like you speak badly about a devotee, you drop the deity to the ground, or you do some things like that, maybe by a mistake, but at least you're aware of it. So it's not so common that we are unaware of offenses. So if we're sitting and we're being honest with ourselves and thinking, did I do an offense that caused this lack of taste in me? It may be that we didn't. And then we just have to kind of, instead of kind of becoming neurotic about how can I fix this, we just focus on getting back the taste through engaging in service, and especially through engaging in Mahat Seva, service of the great. And Mahat, of course, Prabhupada translates it as serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, or pure devotees in the word for word. So Mahat doesn't just refer to our spiritual master. It refers to all kinds of great devotees. We can read about the qualities of devotees in scriptures, such as the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. But usually we don't need to read about it. We will know, we will see that some persons are engaged in service. Some people are naturally very kind of almost like worshipable, like Shamanan and Sekirati, for example. They live here in my town, so I know them a little bit, and they have wonderful qualities. The kind of qualities that really make you feel you want to serve these kind of persons. If you'd ask them, they would never call themselves Mahat, and that's something that just adds to their qualities. But for me, they are an example of Mahat devotees, great devotees, pure devotees. Pure devotee doesn't need to be a person who has descended from Vaikuntha and who are whose feet don't touch the ground. But they are persons that are inspiring us even a little bit. That will be good for us to serve devotees like that. So Suta Goswami continues. He says, Shrinvatam svakatha Krishna punya shravana kirtana hridyantasto yabadrani vidhunoti suhrit satam. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead who is Paramatma in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. So, when we develop the taste for Krishna Katha, then Krishna himself will purify us from within. This is an important point that the Goswamis deal with in different places of their books. We don't, as devotees, need any other kinds of purificatory methods. In Sanatana Dharma or in Hinduism, there are many methods for purification, methods for atonement also. If you've done something wrong, then you can atone for that by fasting, by giving donations, by staying up at night, and so on and so forth. As devotees, we don't need to do anything like that. Our atonement is bhakti itself. If, in fact, thinking that we should do something apart from bhakti is kind of an offense, because it implies that there's something more powerful than bhakti. So going to the Himalayas and fasting and staying alone in a cave, that's not necessary for us devotees, and it's not even good for us devotees. We shouldn't take shelter of any other processes than bhakti itself. So Suta Goswami, he says, Krishna Katha, it will purify us from within. And the reason for that, of course, is that there's a non-difference between Krishna and Krishna Katha. This is a point that Sanatana Goswami makes in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. The two are one. So by engaging in listening to Krishna Katha, we are actually in touch with Krishna. We're probably more in touch with Krishna through listening to him, to stories about him, than through trying to, for example, see him, even in the form of the beautiful Sri Murtis. And then, let me see. Suta Goswami goes on. He says, Nasta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatyuttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. This is a famous verse. To be honest, almost all of these verses are famous. I think Prabhupada recommended practically the whole second chapter of the first canto of the Bhagavatam for learning by heart. These are really powerful and important verses. But this one, I'm sure everybody has heard. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So by regular Bhagavata Seva, these things will happen. Prabhupada has translated Bhagavata Seva here as two different things, borrowing from the commentaries of the Acharyas. Bhagavata Seva can mean attending on the Bhagavatam, listening to the Bhagavatam. Like we're doing now, for example, listening to the talks on Srimad Bhagavatam. But Bhagavata Seva can, of course, also means serving the Bhagavata, the personified Bhagavata, the devotee. The devotees in Srimad Bhagavatam are usually called Bhagavatas. They are not often called Vaishnavas. They're usually called Bhagavatas. In ancient times, there were devotees that were known as Vaishnavas. There were devotees that were known as Pancharatrins. And there were devotees known as Bhagavatas. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam, these terms are not used to denote different kind of schools of devotees. They are used in a synonymous way. So Bhagavata in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and also in the language of, for example, Sanatana Goswami, refers to Vaishnavas. So Bhagavata Seva means service of the Vaishnavas. By engaging in regular service of the, Prabhupada sometimes says, book Bhagavata and the person Bhagavata, almost everything inauspicious is destroyed from the heart. And loving service to the personality of Godhead is established as an irrevocable fact. Bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. There will be nishtha, or steady bhakti. To who? The Lord, who is praised with transcendental song. Bhagavati uttama shloke. Uttama shloka means he who is praised with the best verses. It's an interesting name for the Lord, Uttama Shloka. It's used not very often. But I think the point here is that this is a description of the Lord, but it's also a description of the Bhagavatam. The Lord is praised by the beautiful verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's certainly true. The Bhagavatam is very much a work of poetry, in distinction to most of the other Puranas, or all the other Puranas. The other Puranas are they are fun and interesting and important in many different ways, but they're not literally, in a literary way, very special. They're written in simple, kind of pedestrian Sanskrit. But the Bhagavatam is a work of kavya, a work of sometimes very exquisite and very kind of refined poetry. So Uttama Shloka refers to the Lord, who is praised by excellent shlokas, but it also refers to the Lord who is praised by the Srimad Bhagavatam itself. Suta Goswami goes on. He says, Tada rajastamo bhava kamalo bhadayaschaye cheta etair anavidham stitam sattve prasidati. As soon as irrevocable loving service is established in the heart, the effects of nature's modes of passion and ignorance, such as lust, desire, and hankering, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness, and he becomes completely happy. So this, of course, was the question. Yenatma samprasidati tadvada. Speak about that which can make the Atma completely happy, completely satisfied. And here we get this word prasidati again. So this happens through Krishna Katha. When bhakti is established in the heart, rajas, tamas, which lead to things like lust, anger, greed, and so on, they leave the cheta, they leave the mind, and instead a sattvic state takes over. Now, the previous verse said, Nashta prayeshva bhadreshu, almost all which is bad leaves the heart. And here we get a hint to what that means. The devotee is established in sattva. Sattva is the best of the gunas in many different ways. But sattva is also a material mode. And sattva also binds us. Do you remember what sattva binds us to? Who remembers, according to the Gita?
To religious practices?
A good guess, but that's not what the Gita says. The Gita says,
what the commentary says.
maybe. Yeah, the Gita says that sattva binds to happiness, yes, correct, happiness and knowledge. So when we are in sattva, we get this kind of clarity. That's one of the meanings of the word sattva, clarity. So we kind of start seeing things in a clear way. And we also get this kind of peaceful happiness. And it's so nice to have both of those, to get kind of contentment. Yeah, that's a good synonym. It's so nice to have those two things. We kind of feel like we're getting out of this craziness of the world and everything is calm and clear and beautiful. And we get so attached to that. At least me, when I get into that mood, I get so attached to that. I feel like then somebody comes and speaks to me about something, and then the sun goes behind the clouds and everything is spoiled. So sattva can really make us attached to itself. Sattva is better than rajas and tamas because it gives this clarity. It gives us peace also, so that we can engage in bhakti without having to be worried about the senses, as in rajas, and without this kind of overwhelming heaviness of mind and body that characterizes tamas. So it really is the best guna for bhakti, but bhakti is beyond the gunas. Even sattva can bind us. So that's why nashta prayesh, almost everything bad, disappears from the heart. Then Suta Goswami says, Evam prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogata bhagavat tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayati. Thus established in the mode of unalloyed goodness, the man whose mind has been enlivened by contact with devotional service to the Lord gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association. The Sanskrit of this positive scientific knowledge is Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam, or realization of the truth of the Lord. That's what Prabhupada translates as positive scientific knowledge. And it's not a bad translation, because scientific knowledge is supposed to be about things that are observable, falsifiable, repeatable. And all of these things really apply to bhakti as well. There's a particular process that we follow, and things that we can quickly learn that these things will be good for my bhakti, these things will be bad, and it works. And this is the kind of knowledge that we want to get. We want to get this kind of realized knowledge, not just kind of theoretical knowledge like, ooh, how many verses do you know? Or have you studied Bengali already? Do you know the Oriya script? This kind of theoretical knowledge that might be useful sometimes, but that's not what the Bhagavatam is speaking about. It's speaking about Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana, or realization of the truth of the Lord. Tattva can mean truth. Tattva can also mean category or class. So realization of the Bhagavat Tattva, or the category of knowledge that deals with Bhagavan, with the Lord. This will come then when the mind is enlivened or purified. Evam prasanna manaso, it says. Evam, when this kind of sattvic state has been reached, then through Bhagavad Bhakti, this realization of the truth of the Lord is born, and then mukta sangasya jayate, a person who is free from sangha or free from attachment will be liberated. Prabhupada translates it, in the stage of liberation from all material association. Sangha, of course, can mean association as well. Association with saintly persons or with not that saintly persons. But Sangha can also mean attachment in general. So we'll get free from attachment at this stage, and then from there gain positive knowledge of the Lord. Suta Goswami goes on, he says, Vidyate hridaya grantish, chintyante sarva samshaya, kshiyante chasya karmani, drishtva evatmanishvari. Thus the knot in the heart is pierced, and all misgivings are cut to pieces. The chain of fruitive actions is terminated when one sees the self as master. This is a dramatic verse. So many things going on here. The knot of the heart is cut. All the doubts are sliced to pieces. And the karmas are kshiyante, they are destroyed. All the reactions of our work, or reactionary work, as Prabhupada called it in the previous verse, work that is done to get some kind of reaction of getting something or avoiding something. And then that happens, these karmas are destroyed, when one sees the self as master. This is an interesting wording. Drishte eva atmani ishvare. When one sees, it appears to say, when one sees the self as the Ishvara, or as the Lord. But it can be understood in different ways as well. In this book that I mentioned before, the Bhagavata Samlapa by Srila Prabhupada's senior godbrother, Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha Maharaj, who was not actually Prabhupada's godbrother. He was the disciple of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, but he got sannyas from Bhaktisiddhanta. He translates it like this: when there is such a realization of the all-pervading Supreme Lord Sri Krishna in the unalloyed existence of a devotee, so drishta evatmanishvare, when one sees the Lord in the self. So Prabhupada takes it as when one sees the self as master, but we can take it also as when one sees the Lord within the self. And this, of course, is something that happens at this point, when the knot of the heart has been cut and so on. So Suta Goswami, in these very kind of we could say kind of key verses, he portrays the whole path towards this Atma Samprasidati, this total satisfaction of the self, from beginning to end. And he says, then finally, he says, Ato vai kavayo nityam bhaktim paramaya muda vasudevi bhagavati kurvantyatma prasadani. So he gets back to this atma prasad. He says, certainly, therefore, since time immemorial, all transcendentalists have been rendering devotional service to Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, with great delight, because such devotional service is enlivening to the self. So if we want to get this Atma Samprasidati or Atma Prasadana or whatever word is used here, the words are sometimes differing a little bit, mostly for metric reasons. Then it is this part of bhakti that has thus been described in brief in these verses that we have to engage in. The word for the Lord here is Vasudeva Bhagavan or Vasudevi Bhagavati in the locative. Vasudeva Prabhupada translates as Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, because one meaning of the word Vasudeva is the son of Vasudeva. So it really refers to Sri Krishna himself. Vasudeva can also be a name for Vishnu, meaning the pervasive one or something like that. And the Bhagavatam, of course, uses that word in both meanings because it wants to kind of bring together all the different Vaishnavas, whatever kind of form that we're worshipping. So you can use this word Vasudeva in this kind of general sense. But then gradually we're supposed to kind of narrow our focus then onto Sri Krishna himself. So this kind of bhakti to Krishna, that's the focus on the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's also interesting that the word used here for devotees, or Prabhupada translates as all transcendentalists, is kavayaha. Kavayaha is the plural of the word kavi. Kavi means a sage, but kavi more literally means a poet. Being poetic, we hear it in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, is a quality of devotees. But here it's interesting that devotees are called kavis. They're called poets. It's no coincidence, I think. Again, Krishna is called Uttama Shloka. He's the one who is glorified with the most beautiful verses. And who are the ones who are creating beautiful verses? Well, the poets, of course. So this is something that we as devotees can also think about and practice. A nice way to glorify Krishna is to glorify him through our words, both spoken and written. Many of us have perhaps in our youth been interested in writing poetry and detailing our tribulations when we had our heart broken for the first time and so on. And maybe we now think that writing poetry is something that teenagers do. But it doesn't have to be like that. We can write, we can speak poetry at whatever age. And it doesn't necessarily need to be anything that we will publish or have the world read. It can be completely private as well. There's a Swedish devotee in a place called Almvik. His name is Arishtaha. He's a disciple of Prabhupada. He writes poetry, very sweet, kind of heartfelt poetry. I've been lucky enough to read. It's not kind of the most polished or the kind of poetry that just some general poetry lover would like. But for a devotee, it's very sweet because it all deals with Krishna, it all deals with devotional life and so on. So devotees generally are quite poetic. Even if we don't show this publicly, it's a quality that we can nurture for ourselves and something that we can use for helping us remember Krishna more in our lives. Thinking about things that remind us about Krishna. And of course, the scriptures are full of this kind of poetry. So if we don't feel that we want to create such poetry ourselves, or we don't feel that we are pure enough or talented enough or whatever, at least we can enjoy what others have written. And we can find this kind of poetry in the pages of the Srimad Bhagavatam, as I've said before, but also in the writings of our acharyas like Rupa Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti, Jiva Goswami, and so on. So this is how Suta Goswami answered the second question. I said that I'm going to go through the 6 questions in maybe 3 parts, but I think it will be more than that because I'm still only at the end of the second. But I'm going to end here for today. Are there any questions or comments?
Pranam. Thank you for the class, and I hope you get well soon. And I would get curious about the anecdote you mentioned in the beginning where Radha and Krishna were saving the devotees. Would you like to say what happened there? Because it sounded very bad and someone died, but it could have been worse. But so what happened?
Well, it's a very dramatic story. The devotees had been preaching, I forget where it was, but for a long time, Vishnujan Maharaj and his group, and he had this bus with Radha Damodar, and then he had 2 vans with Sankirtan devotees who would go out distributing. Suhotra, later on, Suhotra Maharaj was the Sankirtan leader in one of those vans. So they would go out and preach, and they were staying for some time in one place next to some kind of camp or some kind of place where this huge biker gang was hanging out. And the daughter of the leader of that biker gang, she and one of the devotees, they had some kind of an affair. So when the devotees left, she wanted to go with the devotees, but Vishnujan Maharaj, he didn't allow her to go because, first of all, he didn't know about that affair, and secondly, he thought that this is just like maybe she's not even like 18. This girl, she was, I got the impression that she was maybe like 17 or something, and she can't just come with us without the permission of her parents. That would just be like a huge mess. So he didn't allow her to come, but she had already run away from home by then. So she just went somewhere else. But her father, who was the boss of this biker gang, he thought that she had gone with the devotees. So from there, the devotees, they went to New Vrindavan, where they had this huge festival of they call it the Anantashesha festival, like a groundbreaking festival for a temple they wanted to make for Radha Govinda. So they had this huge festival there, and lots of devotees were there. And then Vishnujan Maharaj and his group, they already left, but the other devotees were still there. And then this biker gang came in the late one evening, I think it was. Oh no, they came like in the evening. And they surrounded the whole place, and they like came with guns. And there was this scuffle, and a couple of devotees got shot. And they asked for this girl, and everybody said that she's not here. We don't know where she is, but they didn't believe it. So they asked that who's in charge. And Kirtanananda Maharaj, who was already the head of New Vrindavan, he said, I'm in charge. He was brave in that way. So they immediately took him. They took another devotee. They said, there's some shovels there. You take 1 shovel each. We'll go on the other side of that hill, and you can dig your own graves, and then we'll shoot you. And in order not to make even bigger kind of danger for anybody, Kirtananda Maharaj and the other devotee, they took the shovels and they went with some of these heavily armed guys up the hill. Meanwhile, the other bikers, they were there in the temple and they were bullying the devotees. And then one of them noticed that there's some kind of curtain by one wall. And he opened it and he saw the deities, Radha, Vrindavan, Chandra. And they realized that these are your gods. So he took Krishna and pulled him off the altar, so he fell on the ground and got broken. And then he said to one young boy who was standing on the altar, completely completely devastated, he said to him, "Pull over that girl as well, Radharani." And he wouldn't do it, even though he was just like a 16-year-old boy or something. He wouldn't do it. He said he's never going to do it. So they started beating him like anything. And the other devotees realized that if they don't stop this, then they're going to kill that boy. So they said, "We will do it." So they took Radha, and the bikers said that drop her on the ground, or I guess they said drop it on the ground, the statue. So they dropped Radha on the ground, but when she touched the ground, even though she was made of marble, the sound of this marble touching the ground was completely like otherworldly. Nobody could have imagined such a sound. So there was this huge, like, booming sound. So the bikers who were leading Maharaj and the other devotee up the hill to kill them, they heard this like huge explosion from the temple room. And they thought that something is gone wrong. So they left them and they ran back, and the bikers there in the temple room were also completely like shocked by this sound. So they all ran away. So Radha saved them all by making that huge sound. And then later on they decided to, or the same day, they decided to take the deities into an office or something like that. And contrary to what it says in the Shastra, they didn't discard the deities because they had been broken, but instead they fixed the deities. But they fixed them in such a way that you can actually see the scars. You can see the ways in which they had been broken. I've never seen those deities myself, but I can imagine that especially for those devotees who were there for when all of that happened, and when Krishna and Radha saved them in that kind of really self-sacrificing way, how sweet it must be to see those kind of wounds on them. It must be like when Radha sees like Krishna's, her own kind of bite marks on Krishna's body or something like that. So I thought that was a very inspiring and quite dramatic story as well. I'd heard it kind of in before, but never in such detail as this.
Thank you. I've heard Guru Maharaj mention about some pujari there saying that if Shri Shri Radha Vrindavan Chandra are not in Goloka, I'm not going there.
Yeah. Hey, thank you everyone. Thank you. Hope to see you next time. Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandhar Vikagiri Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan Radha Govindra Gopinath Radha Damodar Sham Sundara Radha Ramana Radha Gokulanda Radha Madhava Dauji Gopal Nitai Gaur Shri Sharbhuj Giriraj Shri Radha Vrindavan Chandra Ki Jai. Jai Vishnu Parvaram Superraj Kacharya Stotar Sutta Shri Shimad Bhaktivedanta Tripurari Dev Goswami Maharaj Gurudev Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Jai Panchatattvatmak Shri Gaur Hari Ki Jai. Jai Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham ki jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Shri Jagannath Pur Dham ki jai, Jai Bhakti Vigna Vinashanakar Shri Nrsimhadev Bhagavan ki jai, Jai Bhakta Varavara Prahlad Maharaj ki jai, Jai Shri Kartik Vrata ki jai, Shri Urja Vrata ki jai, Urjeshwari Shri Radha Thakurani ki jai, Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol.
Shriman Bhrigupada Prabhu ki jai.
Hari Bol. See you next time.